Hello, you beautiful little marketing bees. You're tuned into episode 82 of Marketing Buzzword Podcast.
This is the Marketing Buzzword Podcast, the podcast where we dissect the world's most common marketing buzzwords. Hold on tight. We are about to fly around the beehive to see the latest buzzwords that stuck to the marketing bees.
Hello again and welcome back to the Marketing Buzzword Podcast. This is a podcast which helps you to understand what all these business and marketing buzzwords actually mean and how they can be helpful or not going forward. I'm your host Ben Roberts, and in this show I'm the marketing bee in charge of making sure I'm getting the right guests and ask the right questions to make sure these words and phrases actually make sense. In today's show, we're going to make sense of the buzzword funnels. So marketing funnels. Before we do that though, I need to let you know this podcast is powered by Talkative. Talkative is a company that brings together live web chat, web calling, video calling and co-browsing together in one package embedded into your website. It allows you to enhance your customer experience, or your customer's customer experience, while also providing you a lot more data and insight in order to help you provide better service and save all that data automatically into your CRM. It's really cool software. Check it out at talkative.uk. And one final thing before we get on to this week's guest, we have now set up a Facebook group called Marketing Worker Bees. So if you are listening to the show and you want to sort of find out a bit more about marketing, buzzwords, how we implement them, how it all works together, just go onto your Facebook and type in Marketing Worker Bees in the search bar and you will be able to get access to the Facebook group. So please, if you are enjoying the show, please do that. Now, that's more enough about me. It's time to introduce this week's guest. Now, this week's guest is a guy called Sam Wilcox. Sam is the founder of, and this is why I really get this name of this company wrong, Tribecto Automations, a marketing, sales and business automation consultancy for SMEs selling mid to high ticket services. With over 10 years experience in the digital marketing industry, Sam decided to double down on his passions, helping clients to get more leads, make more sales and save more time with custom marketing automation and CRM software setups. Check him out at tribecto.com. Right, that's more than enough from me. Let's get on with the show. Hi Sam, and welcome to the podcast.
Hey Ben, thanks for having me, mate. Yeah, really good to be here.
Hey, the pleasure is absolutely all mine. So, today, the customer journey. Now this is a buzzword, isn't it, Sam?
I don't like to think of it as too much of a buzzword. It's critical, Ben. But yeah, no, it is, I suppose. It can be broken down into something that's a bit more easy to understand, so I'm sure we'll dive into that.
Yeah, no, this is the thing. This is just a word or a term that people use all the time, and it's used en masse. And we call it a buzzword because it's quite all encapsulating. So yeah, I think the idea of this really is we're going to go sort of dive into the customer journey and just sort of try and find out what really makes it tick. Because when people use the term customer journey now, it means almost a plethora of different things, and people don't actually understand necessarily what necessarily is or isn't included in a customer journey, because it seems like everything's a customer journey. So let's try and break it down to some of its parts then, Sam.
It is. No, you're 100% right. And it depends on whose mouth it comes out of as well, right? So whose mouth the word comes out of, because a customer journey to somebody who's a UX designer is a completely different thing to somebody who is, a content strategist, for example, right? So, and it goes by other terms. Maybe it's a user journey, maybe it's a buyer's journey. There's a lot of things that kind of incorporate a customer journey. So you're 100% right there. For me, when I talk about the customer journey, I mean, I deal with kind of marketing automation and CRM stuff. So for my clients, when I talk to them about the customer journey, I'm really talking to them about understanding the path, or the literal journey that their customers go on from the point that they are aware of the problem that my client's service or product solves to the point where they make that purchase decision, and everything in between, right? So you're taking somebody from that awareness stage down towards the purchase decision stage, and all the stages in between as well, which I can break down for you if you'd like.
Yeah, no, I think that's interesting. And quick question before we go into that is,
Sure.
why would you class the customer journey as only going maybe into the sort of buying phase? Would you not count the...
I don't. It obviously goes past that into, into things like, onboarding and referrals and all that kind of stuff. So ascension, as I suppose some people would call it. But the way that when I'm talking to my customers about it, I'm selling services specifically talking about, marketing automation and getting somebody from that awareness piece down towards making a purchase. We do go into details after that as well, but for me, that's the main bit that I focus on, if that makes sense.
No, it does. So how would you break that down then from the top down? So generating awareness, how would you break down that part of? I guess would you put it as in terms of a user flow? Would you put it in terms of a funnel? Because there's a lot of stuff that I'm reading and seeing right now is that people are saying that the funnel is dead, and other people are still living and dying by the funnel and saying it's actually brilliant. So where do you see sort of awareness and how does that fit into this funnel or user journey? Do you use a different sort of method of capturing the customer journey?
Yeah, so the awareness piece is like I say, it's kind of what you can do as a business to generate awareness for your product, right? And how can you be in front of your customers at that point where they realize that they now have a problem that can be solved, right? Does that make sense? So
yeah.
When you break the awareness piece down, if we really dive into that piece, generally what I'm talking to my clients about is what are the opportunities that you have as a business to generate awareness at that point in time specifically. So it might be through things like PPC advertising, or through SEO, or through any kind of general awareness. For me is more about advertising, like outbound advertising. Okay. Before you then move down into the next stage, which I generally classify as the research stage.
Okay. And how does that flow in from the awareness to the research stage? Is it quite a set process where you go, look, this content or stuff we're creating is definitely for awareness, and the next stage, this is definitely for research, or is it all a bit more entwined? Is it less sort of segregated than that?
It's a little bit more entwined than that, I would say. So, I mean, why don't I give an example, right?
Love examples.
Yeah, it's probably the easiest way to do it. So, I've got a good example here. I mean, it's one that I give quite regularly, mainly because it's one of my clients, but also because I'm literally going on this customer journey right now myself, right? And it's, let's just say that you are a kitchen design company, right? And you want to take somebody down that path from being aware that they now need a new kitchen to the point where they want to make a decision and actually make that purchase from you, okay? So at the awareness stage, what I do with clients is I'm talking to them about what do you think your customers are thinking, doing, and feeling when they become problem aware. And by problem aware, I mean they have that light bulb moment in their head and they think, right, we need to get a new kitchen, right? So at that awareness stage, generally what they're kind of thinking is our kitchen's a bit run down, our kitchen isn't big enough, we don't have enough space to cook, or we don't, we're not enjoying the workspace, we're just generally not enjoying our kitchen anymore, right? But at this point in time, when they're still in this just problem aware stage, what are they doing as well? And they're pretty much just making do with the kitchen. They've been making do with the kitchen for however long. And then we talk about, okay, well, what are they feeling in this stage as well? So they're probably feeling a little bit frustrated because they don't like the kitchen now. Probably feeling a little bit sad. And maybe if they're quite house proud, maybe they're feeling a little bit embarrassed as well by the kitchen, right? So what happens at that point is they then move down into the research stage. So they start looking for kitchen inspiration and kitchen ideas, right? Do you follow me so far?
It's where Pinterest comes into its own.
Exactly right. Yeah. So, at that point, when they move down from that awareness stage into the research stage, that's when they start taking a little bit of action. And they're generally thinking things like, what are the current trends? How can I make the best use of the space that I have? How much is a new kitchen? Do I really need a new kitchen? There's all these kind of things that are going through their head in this research stage while they're kind of looking at inspiration and kind of looking at ideas. They're not so committed at this point. They're kind of just exploring it. They're starting to research, okay? Like you say, what they're doing is they're looking at things on Pinterest, searching for ideas on Google, maybe reading magazines and talking to friends and looking at friends' kitchens, families' kitchens, all that kind of good stuff. And maybe they're starting to feel, because, we go into the feeling point of this as well, maybe they're starting to feel, a bit more excited, a bit more hopeful about, realizing this dream of a new kitchen, and probably getting a bit more motivated as well, because when you do research and you're looking for inspiration and different ideas, obviously that kind of motivates you down that path. So hopefully that kind of makes sense how I'm breaking this down. There's the stages that they move down, but then what we do is we analyze, okay, well, what are your customers thinking, doing, and feeling at each point in these stages as well. So from the research stage, you then move into the consideration stage where things are getting a little bit more, I would say a little bit more committed. They're being a little bit more committed there. So they're probably looking at, price ranges and styles that are available locally, because, you're generally not considering buying a kitchen from anybody that's not local, because it's one of those purchases that has to be made pretty locally, really. It's not something that you're going to get shipped over from China unless you know how to fit it all and do it all yourself, right? So, they move into the consideration stage when they're thinking about, who's got the best styles, who's the cheapest, what's the timescales for this kind of project, what's the process, who's got a good reputation, all of that kind of stuff.
No, I like that. So it's sort of, you start off with the awareness, and it's the idea of the problem solving stage. We move to research, where it sort of start looking to take action, to trying to sort of, okay, so what does this mean? How can you actually potentially solve those problems? And then you go, okay, I can sort of understand how I need to solve those problems. So now it's going, okay, so who can actually help me solve these? Who can actually help me solve these problems? And now what's the damage going to be?
Exactly. Yeah. So, when you start looking at those kind of things in that consideration stage, like I say, the level of commitment at that point probably changes quite a bit, because you're not going to spend the time going locally and looking at these different companies that can solve the problem unless you a bit more committed. So they'll probably be checking things like reviews, looking for pricing information, measuring. When you get the tape measure out, this is the point where I'm at right now. You get the tape measure out and you start planning the kitchen, right? At that point, it's gone from being an idea that you've been kind of thinking about for a while to something that's probably going to happen at some point in the near future, right? So then you go through that whole process and you start feeling a little bit more excited, a bit more invested in the process, all right? And then, and again, this is all within this kitchen design example, but the next stage that you would go down into is the choice reduction stage, before then making the purchase decision. So the choice reduction is where you would go out and you'd start speaking with different suppliers, and then you're analyzing, okay, well, who's going to do the best job here? Who's going to do the job in the allotted time frame that I need it to be done? Who looks like the best value for money? Who has the best payment options? Who do I trust? And generally, you're getting designs, you're getting quotes, you're comparing quotes, asking for discounts maybe. And at that point, this is the point just before the purchase decision, you're probably feeling very heavily committed to the process and seeing the project through, but you're also really feeling quite nervous and probably quite a little bit cautious about making the decision as well, because these kind of high ticket sales or these kind of high ticket items, it's not cheap, so it comes with a level of nervousness and indecisiveness as well, which needs to be navigated by the business, right?
Yeah. No, that makes sense. So how can we, as businesses then, how do we understand And how do we create stuff that it actually feeds into different parts of these stages? So how and what do we know? Sorry, how do we know which content to create, which will help generate awareness or feed into the awareness stage? How do we know what content and things we need on our website to help with the research, consideration, choice reduction, purchasing stage? So one of the things you mentioned is review. So how would you know to put those on? How do you decide what goes where in order to help move people through this customer journey and sort of either prevent blockages or ease flow? So how do we decide what goes where? How do we understand that customer journey that it flows on? Do we ask them directly? Do we just look at tools? How does it all that fit together?
That's a great question. It's a combination of all of the above, I would say. The first thing that you need to do is have an understanding of what this journey looks like by writing all of this stuff down. And that's pretty much the first thing that I do with all of my clients is we get this template out and we go through this example and we write down, okay, well, if this is your business, what are people thinking and feeling and doing in the awareness stage? What are your customers doing, right? And once you've mapped all of this out, this customer journey, that gives you the answers to the question that you've just asked. So, for example, if we know that during the awareness stage, people are thinking about, okay, well, our kitchen's a bit run down or our workspace isn't efficient. You can start creating content around those things that they're thinking. Obviously it flows into the research stage as well. So if people are thinking about, well, what are the current trends and, how much is a new kitchen? You want to start creating content around the questions that they're asking themselves at that stage in the process. And then when we look at the things that they're doing at those stages, so like you said previously, looking at ideas on Pinterest, reading magazines, that's going to give you your opportunities. It's going to tell you where you might want to publish this content. So you might want to be focusing your efforts on Pinterest, or you might want to be focusing your efforts on Google, or maybe it is, if in your industry, maybe it is traditional advertising in magazines, right? So like the wedding industry, for example, that would be a perfect example. So it really depends on what your customers are doing and thinking and feeling at those stages. And once you've mapped all of this out, it's going to give you the answers, because all that you need to do is answer the questions that your customers are asking at each one of these stages, right? And what I do from a framework with my clients is we kind of map out this customer journey, and then we say, right, well, how do we get somebody from the awareness stage down to the consideration or past the consideration stage into the choice reduction stage, right? If they're in a choice reduction stage, it's generally when they're speaking to suppliers or they're going to be speaking with different vendors. And I work with a lot of service companies. So most of the sales that are being done are via, a consultation or via a meeting or, via some kind of face-to-face interaction. So what we do is we design our whole process around getting somebody to the choice reduction stage. It's all about producing content and putting that content in places where we can collect email addresses and we can nurture that customer over time by providing them content and providing them educational pieces that are going to take them down this customer journey to the point where they're going to book in a meeting with one of my clients and then enter that choice reduction stage. Does that make sense?
No, it makes a huge amount of sense. I think it's a really interesting way of sort of looking at it in terms of almost like, especially from the kitchen analogy, looking at actually how do we break down these different bits. So yeah, I think from a large scale, so you've got an expensive, you've got quite an emotive subject like a kitchen or a car, something that's quite big. I think it's easy to see, well, not easy, but it's I guess the pattern is quite clear that there's some real definite stages. So what about people who are moving in sort of in the FMCG sectors, the fast-moving consumer goods? Is the process different for there because there is generally less consideration almost in there? And how does the customer journey work for people that have more have faster flowing products and quicker services?
It's a good question. I mean, it still does come down to the same process, I would imagine. It's not my area of expertise, so I don't want to speak out of turn. I don't want anybody to think that I'm an idiot just saying stuff that I don't know massive amounts about, okay? But I would argue that the process is going to be the same. Maybe there's some kind of impulse decisions that are being made in that kind of sector which need to be taken into consideration, and it's more about how do we trigger those impulses. But we do need to still think about the customer journey and what they're thinking, feeling, and doing before they make that purchase interaction, so that we can try and trigger that, if that makes sense.
No, that makes sense. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. And so then taking it back then to sort of more back to your area of expertise then. The one thing that sort of got my my creative juices flowing while you were talking about it is talking about the idea of actually moving people back through this journey. And I was thinking, okay then, so do you create separate bits of content that are designed
Yep.
each stage of this, and then hope that you move through, maybe have a CTA in there that will just say, oh look, almost like, okay, this is your awareness bit, click here for more information, click here to buy, click here to compare versus our competitors. So like that. Do you have that all based under separate pages and you almost literally have a move from page to page, or do you try and actually almost do it within a single page example, where almost like the flow that you're talking about is almost done through the flow of a page, or almost then going from page to page, if that makes sense?
There needs to be actions that we can track. Okay, so like I said at the beginning, what I do is we kind of work out this with clients, and then we figure out how we can automate these interactions and track them as well, right? So what you're saying is right. You would have a call to action at the end of every piece. So we'd want a piece of content that is informative and answers questions for people, but it always gives them the next step, right? And if they do take that next step, we want to be able to track that back in the system that we're using, to either do a couple of things really. We can monitor them moving down the path and see who's where on this journey with us. We can collect, obviously we would want to be collecting things like email addresses and contact information to follow up with at a later stage, but also as well just through general interaction with the pieces, whether they are doing things like clicking and staying on the pages for more than a certain amount of time, or whether they are clicking and watching videos on pages and all that kind of stuff. Depending on what the content is, we would track the interaction with that and the engagement with that as well. And then what we do is we feed that back into the CRM and the marketing automation platform into the form of a lead score, right? So if you as a business have a sales team that needs feeding, and the sales team needs to know who they should be spending their time on, a lead scoring mechanism based off of activity and engagement with content pieces that are designed to move people down this customer journey is an incredibly valuable asset.
No, I really like that idea of the lead scoring. So is that something that you generally would get within a lot of CRMs? Is this something that you would design yourself? How does the lead scoring system work, and who designs and who decides the weightings? And actually, if it's yourselves, how do you understand which is what's weighted higher than others?
Yeah, for sure. It's a great question. So most CRMs have some kind of lead scoring capability out the box. So whether you're using HubSpot, we generally use a system called Ontraport for a lot of our clients. Yep. You've got Infusionsoft, all of these, Active Campaign. It doesn't really matter which one you use. Most of them have lead scoring out the box. And if you're just setting this up for yourself, you can do this really easily. And you can track things like, email opens or page visits or email clicks, any of this good stuff. But in terms of the weighting, you would just generally do that by the value of the engagement. So, an email open isn't as valuable as somebody opening the email and then clicking in that email, right, to a piece of content. Then if somebody clicks that email, hits a page with a video on it, and then we're using something like Google Tag Manager to feed back information into the system from a video being watched on that page. It's a next level of engagement. So you kind of ranking how these things should be weighted in the lead scoring system based on the level of interaction. Just opening an email isn't necessarily something that you should put massive amount of points weighted towards, but clicks are pretty good. Clicks are a good indicator. And also as well, like I say, if somebody hits that page and stays on it for a certain period of time, again, if we can feed that information back into the CRM system, that should be weighted quite heavily as well, because not only are they clicking through to see the content that you're giving them, they're actually digesting it as well. So, likelihood is these guys are going to be, well, these leads are going to be more engaged with what you're saying as a business.
No, that's really interesting. I really like the idea of the bringing leads going, because I think it's something that it's really easy for people to forget about, because people can get really excited about having leads. And actually, it's all about growing new traffic. It's about doubling traffic. It's about doubling number of leads. But actually, it's much easier to double the amount of leads than it is to increase the number of quality leads. Like anyone, you can buy a load of traffic from Russian gun and porn sites, and you look at that, you've tripled your traffic overnight. But actually, look, you've got no more quality leads. I mean, just because you get an inquiry through your website, if 100% of your inquiries are spam, that's not gonna help you run your business.
Exactly. Yeah. So and lead scoring is one of those things that everybody thinks, oh, that's going to be really great. It's quite a big selling point, I think, a lot of the time for CRM systems, because it sounds so great. But in practice, I would say 90% of the clients that I work with, when I open up the box, it's not being used. So it's a very quick win, and you don't have to do anything fancy with it. You don't have to sit there for ages trying to figure out what the best lead scoring algorithm is. You can do something as simple as giving 5 points to somebody that opens an email, giving 15 points to somebody that clicks, and then and so on and so forth. And you'll see over time whether that lead score is working for you and your business. So it's something that people really want to get involved with, but I think a lot of businesses sometimes, especially if they're kind of smaller businesses, they're not utilizing it because they don't really know where to start with it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I think that's one of the things, isn't it? It's trying to understand the customer journey, is trying to find actually how your customers actually use it, because you can have an idea of how they flow, but actually until you start really doing it, it's quite hard to see. So one of the other question I had then is, what sort of tools do you look at then for using? Because you mentioned obviously about tracking the user data, tracking the clicks and stuff. So obviously Google Analytics is going to be one of the most common ones because it's free to use. But what other tools and systems should people be looking at to track the customer journey from either a tight budget level or something even a little bit more extravagant? Because I guess the people that listen to podcasts, I've got a whole range of people. Some are in like one-man bands and some are part of bigger businesses. So what sort of advice and recommendations do you have around the tools for tracking the customer journey?
I would 100% say that you want to try and get a system that handles most of this sales and marketing stuff for you in all underneath one roof, rather than trying to bolt lots of systems together. The reason being is because you can collect all of the information in one place. It's generally it's going to be better for tracking lead scoring and all this kind of stuff that we're talking about, right? So there's a lot of different tools that you can use. I won't. I'll try and reel off a couple, but obviously there's thousands of these kind of different systems that you could use along the marketing automation process now. But you could use things like HubSpot. HubSpot's very popular. Obviously, it's probably the biggest CRM system, or the small business CRM, I would say, and marketing automation platform. It's great because it's an all-in-one system that encompasses all of the data in one place, like I said, and it has a free plan as well. So if you're just getting started with using a system like this, HubSpot's free plan is generally good, but it's only going to do very limited things for you, and HubSpot gets very expensive very fast as soon as you start really needing to use it for more advanced stuff. So if you've not used any kind of CRM system or any kind of system that allows you to track your engagement with customers and leads, then that's probably a good entry point. But if you want more lower cost options that have a similar feature sets, not exactly the same, but things like Active Campaign is a really good entry level piece of software that I would recommend for people. That's relatively cheap. Like I say, Ontraport as well is my personal favorite. I'm a certified consultant in Ontraport, so I'm going to be slightly biased, obviously. But the flexibility that platform has for the cost for what it costs is incredible as well. So there are a few systems like that allow you to build landing pages, send out, automated email campaigns, do lead scoring, collect customer information, move people down a customer journey. These are some of the pieces of software that you can use to do that.
And what about for sort of growing businesses? Are the tools much different? And do you generally would you look at, say, upgrading those tools from free or low paid versions to higher paid versions, or would you say actually that it's almost like a definite version where actually HubSpot's great for small business, but actually it's after you get to that certain point it may need to go to a bigger one, or same with Entreport, Active Pages, or some of the other ones you've mentioned?
No, I would always the good thing about these companies is that if you're small, there is a package for you with them, right? And as you grow, they make it very easy for you to grow the system with your business. So, for example, with a lot of these smaller kind of systems that manage this stuff, like Active Campaign, let's say, or like Entreport, you might have limitations on the database size that you can have. So the amount of contacts that you can have in there and start tracking through there. But as you start needing those features and as you start growing over time, you can unlock the next plan and the next plan, and it kind of steps up with your business in a really, reasonable way. So I wouldn't be too worried about cost really with some of these ones. You get to the next level when you're, I suppose you start edging towards the end of small businesses into medium-sized businesses, when you start looking at things like Salesforce, Marketo, Pardo, and all of these types of softwares. They're a lot more expensive, even things like NetSuite and all that kind of stuff. But they're a lot more expensive and they're a lot more robust in terms of what you can do, but it's just generally not needed for kind of smaller businesses, right?
Yeah, no, that's one of the things, isn't it? You see a lot of people make the mistakes this year and they go, Salesforce, huge, massive company. Yeah, Salesforce, great.
Yeah.
But actually then don't actually consider the use cases of it, or actually within the business. Actually, it's great that you're going with a big company, but actually it's almost too big.
Yeah, what tends to happen, it's happened a few times that I've seen, is that I mean, not to dive too much into software talk, I suppose, seems as we're supposed to be talking about customer journey, but one of the things that I do see quite often when I'm speaking with clients and potential new clients is if they have a board or any kind of VC backing, they tend to favor things like Salesforce, just because the people that are on the board tend to know that piece of software. If they're involved in other businesses that have it, which is fine. But there are other options out there. So yeah, just make sure you do your research. It's hard though. It's a hard area to research fully because there are so many options. And I've been through the pain before of opting for a specific CRM and it just not working out, and then having to move through CRMs to try and find the right one is such a painful thing for any business to go through. So put the research in up front and make sure that you find a system that can allow you to track, manage, and build touch points around your customer journey into it as best as possible.
So yeah, no, I think it's really interesting. And then one things that I want to sort of go back into sort of the customer journey side of things now.
Yeah,
is looking at, okay, so we're tracking everything now. So we're using one of these tools we just mentioned. We're looking down the customer journey, doing awareness, consideration, purchasing funnels. We're looking down there, and we see a number of blockages. Now, how do we actually identify exactly what the blocker is? So how do we know that simply, or even if it's not necessarily a blocker, how do we actually see? So things like changing the color on a button. How do we actually do this? Do we have to just constantly A/B test stuff and go, oh, we don't know if this is right? Where do you get to that stage where perfectionism, you're like, this is as good as it's going to get, and we're just fiddling with stuff for the sake of it now? Or how do people actually work out what is actually going to be a useful change or not change? Because that's what the thing I can see people getting really hung up on is, oh God, our customer journey is not great. We're only converting at 5%. Okay, well actually that might be quite good, but you don't know that because everyone's telling you online that it should be like 14%, or how I converted 100% of my traffic in 6 minutes. Brilliant.
Yeah. Well, no, it's a good point. Now, really and again, it really comes down to doing the work up front to really identify your customer journey and what the critical points in it are, right? So not only do you want to use the customer journey for generating content ideas, but we should really be identifying how we move people from one stage to another. And that's generally going to happen by some kind of call to action, some kind of opt-in, or some kind of action. Okay? So whatever that action is, we need to clearly know when the customer has an opportunity to take that action and what the percentage of them actually taking that action is, if that makes sense, right? Now, once we've got a clear understanding of all of that, we can see very easily where the bottlenecks are in the process. So if we know that we've got a load of really good content that's killing the awareness and research stages for us, okay, because it's attracting people to our website, it's getting views, and it's getting site engagement, i.e. they're not bouncing off the page in 2 seconds, they're staying on there for a good period of time. But we know that we're not collecting any contact information to try and move them down into the consideration stage, then there's a problem there. That's the bottleneck in the customer journey, because we're getting loads of traffic to the page, but we're not converting it, which isn't giving us the ability to then follow up with the people that are in that consideration stage. So that then becomes a key leverage point that we need to identify the problem and either test or tweak different solutions at that point to make sure that we can actually, convert more and open up that bottleneck at that point. Does that make sense as an example?
Yeah. I think it's always interesting to sort of see, because I'm a big believer. I say I'm a big believer. There's a lot of schools of thought, isn't it? It's get things 100% right and be a perfectionist. And there's other one saying, get it done, fix it along the way. And the problem with the customer journey is it's a really difficult blend to get right, because you want as minimal things fit wrong as possible. Because as soon as someone has a blockage in your customer journey, your entire customer journey, especially if they get to a blockage lower down, so they get to that choice reduction phase, and you actually have a block there, you've worked so damn hard to move them 4 ways down your funnel, and then it blocks. And it's always a really interesting one, saying, actually, look, almost further down your funnel, you need to be more of a perfectionist.
Yeah, but you know that it's blocked. That's the good thing.
Yeah.
If you don't have any kind of awareness of your customer journey at all, and you that might have been a blocker anyway, but you weren't aware of it. You don't know that that they're in. You didn't even know that they were in choice reduction stage. You didn't even know why they were failing. So at that point, so by identifying this customer journey and just getting a baseline in and working on it over time is going to give you data that you didn't have before.
Yeah.
And you make your decisions based off of that data. So, I when I speak with new clients and we're going through this whole process, we could sit here for months and really try and drill down into this, these different stages that customers will go through. And there might be more than just these 5 that I'm talking about now. It depends on the business, right? But, just to give a general example, we could spend months designing the perfect customer journey, or what we think is the customer journey, but we're not basing it off anything apart from guesses at this point. So it's more important to get a really rough understanding of what you think is the customer journey first, and back that up with as much data as you have at this minute in time. Then get something in place that allows us to track whether what we think is true. And if it's not true, we should be able to see at which point it isn't true. And then we go back and we reiterate and we test and we improve over time. So I'm all about getting something done and up and ready and done as fast as possible, so that we can start actually making use of and sense of the data that 9 times out of 10 is already actually being is already available to us. It's just not organized in a way that makes sense.
No, that makes a huge amount of sense. I think that's a really nice way to sort of wrap it up, really, because, again, if we haven't got the data, we're going purely on gut instinct. And actually, the more data we have, yes, sometimes you can get this bit of paralysis by analysis, but actually, even if you are slightly slower moving than going with your gut, actually, the chances of you being right are so much better, and that actually is where you get that balance right. Without the data, you are going purely on gut and just deciding you don't really know what you're going to do, whereas actually now you do.
Exactly. You're exactly right. Yeah. It's better to know it's better to know what's wrong than not know what's wrong, obviously.
Well, there's ones, isn't it? There's known knowns, the things you know that you know, the known unknowns, so you know that you don't know them, and then the unknown unknowns, so the things that you don't know that you don't know yet. So at least by having the data, you know that you don't know it yet, or you know that you know it, instead of, God, there's a lot of knowns and unknowns.
That's a tongue twister there, isn't it, for a Monday afternoon?
Oh, I know, right? Right. No, brilliant. Thanks so much for coming on today, Sam. It's been an absolute pleasure. But
My friend, thanks for having me.
So, Sam, now, before I let you go, I need to ask you the same question that I ask everyone at the end of each of these shows, because I can't let you off the hook, and everyone else has had to do it. So, Sam, what are the marketing buzzwords you're loving or hating right now? What is grinding your gears and you go, I hate this, or something that you're like, yes, I absolutely love this term, it's something that I'm using all the time right now?
Okay, yeah, this is a really tough one. It's not something that I kind of think about too much, but I think if I had to be pushed, I'd probably say hustle is one of those words that I just don't necessarily get along with. It's not that I disagree with it being used in certain ways, but I think it's been a bit overplayed at the minute, and I think that grinding yourself into the ground for 14 hours a day isn't necessarily the best thing that we should be promoting. So yeah, I would probably say that one if I had to go with anything.
Nice, yeah. I think a hustle's come up a few times. It's one of those definitely really divisive words where people are like, I get it, but I don't like it. And the idea of working yourself to the bone, always grafting, always working, I think it's a really interesting concept. But I think you're definitely not alone in that one.
I think it depends on how you take it, obviously. I think that how you interpret the word is obviously a big thing. It's very subjective, obviously. So it depends on how you ingest that word and then how you act upon it. But for me, it seems to get thrown a little bit around like a bit of a badge of honor at the minute, which seems a little bit strange.
Yeah, no, I get that. I think that's definitely a Gary V influence, I think.
I think so. I didn't want to say anything, but it kind of is, I suppose, right?
Hey, no, I think he could take it. I feel like mentioning it here is not going to dent his confidence on that.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he'd be fine with me, or doesn't really care about anything that I've got to say. So yeah, I'm sure.
Oh no, brilliant! No, thanks so much for coming on today, Sam. It's been really interesting. I definitely think that people are going to understand the customer journey and what makes it up a little bit more now.
Hopefully, I hope so. Yeah, hopefully it was helpful to people.
Hey, no problem. Thanks, Sam. Take care, mate. Bye bye.
Cheers, Ben. Bye, mate.
I really hope that you got as much from that as I did. I think the customer journey is something I hate the term journey. I really don't like it, but it makes sense. And when you try and think about it in terms of actually the funnels, moving people from one stage to the other, it actually helps make sense. But I think as marketers, we have to really understand that there isn't an exact science. That we don't go, they move from here to here to here to here. Because we're all different, we all have different thought processes, we all have different reasons and rationale of why we come to the conclusions that we do. So I think for us, it's really important that we map out as much of that customer journey as possible, but we're not prescriptive in that they must move down a certain order within a certain time frame. People come and go. So I love what sort of Sam said about trying to use it as a guide, and I think that the customer journey is something that we should all be starting to map out so we can understand how different parts of it all work together. Because if we don't understand a potential customer journey, how are we supposed to make it better? How are we supposed to enhance our customer experience, our customer service, and ultimately retain and win more business? I love to hear what you think. Please also jump on Marketing Worker Bee's Facebook group. I'd love to have you in this. We've just started growing last week. So it's growing really nicely. We're starting to build something there. So if you are loving sort of what we're trying to do on the show, please do get involved with that too. And I'll be back next week with another guest episode. Goodbye.